Okay, so as Alison has very kindly introduced me, my name's Alex. I'm the Programmes Officer for Northamptonshire Community Foundation, so I'm part of the grants team. I'm very happy to be here with you all today to discuss obviously the grants that we have on offer at the moment. So a little bit about Northamptonshire Community Foundation. So as a funder, we're a place-based funder, so our giving and our philanthropy is focused on Northamptonshire. So some of the other funders that you might be meeting over the next few days as part of this funding fair, some of them are going to be have specific themes. So for instance, like the Arts Council, their theme is specifically on arts and culture. But as a community foundation, we're place-based, and so that means that we cover lots of different themes and topics and areas of need, but it's all within Northamptonshire. So all of our applications are done online via... There we go. I thought I got muted for a second. So we can also have a look at draft applications via email. So those would come through to me and I can give you any feedback on your application before you fully submit it. And you can also contact us about if you're unsure about what of the what of the many different funding streams that we have, that if you're not sure which one to go for, then we can give advice about that. We have two different types of grants. So some of them are done on a rolling basis, which means that there's no fixed deadline. We accept applications at any point for those, and they get assessed and decisions are made sort of roughly within a sort of 5 to 10 working day basis. And then we also have a regular grants panel as well, and that happens throughout the year. So we have panels in January, April, June, September and November. So each year we normally aim to award about 1.2 million each year to organisations within Northamptonshire. Last year, obviously, it was an extraordinary year for many, many reasons, and because of COVID-19 and other factors, and we ended up actually awarding in that financial year 2.5 million. So that has gone up an extraordinary amount. A lot of that was to do with the National Emergencies Trust funding that we were delivering, and also funding through DCMS. So as a funder, we work with sometimes national organisations to help deliver funding, but then we also work with local philanthropists as well. So that could be individuals, corporate businesses, and also through sort of local family trusts. And that's also a reason why we've got such a varied amount of different grant programs and funding streams to have a look at, and they're constantly sort of being updated. So it's always good to look at our social media, look at our website, sign up to any of our newsletters so you can get those updates of new funds that are coming into the foundation. So we'll talk a little bit about eligibility. So how do you know if you're able to apply for grants from NCF? So the first major thing is when you're looking at your eligibility is, are you a group, so a voluntary or a community organisation, or you might be a company that's limited by guarantee, or you might be a CIC, so that is a community interest company, and you can get lots of information about setting up as an organisation through the wonderful local infrastructure organisations that we have, such as Voluntary Impact Northamptonshire. But having those constitutions and governing documents is part of the eligibility. You also have to have a bank account that's in your community group's name with at least 2 bank signatories, because this is a way of ensuring that fraud doesn't take place. We also would want to see a recent set of accounts and a bank statement. And then we would also want to see that you had relevant policies in place, such as a child protection policy or a vulnerable adults policy if you're working with children, young people. There are a few other supporting documents that are needed, but obviously we can go through that if you are wanting to apply to us. So as I mentioned, we have lots of different grant funding streams through the foundation. So a tool that's on our website that can really help people navigate through that is our grant finder. So if you go to the apply for a grant section, you'll find the grant finder, and as you can see in the purple section, it's like a grant wizard, we call it, that you can see. It basically asks you some questions and takes you through almost like a flow chart of what grants would be good to go for. And it sort of asks you about your geographical area that you're working in within Northamptonshire, but also if you're looking at tackling any particular needs or priorities. So talking of needs and priorities, here we are on to Northamptonshire Insight. So it's part of our application process, and also with many other funders, you're asked to sort of talk about why there is a need for the project that you're wanting to provide. So we have a section on our website called Northamptonshire Insights, and that is a place where we have worked with local insights so that people can have access to up-to-date data and statistics about your local area within Northamptonshire. So for instance, if you are wanting to do a project around health and well-being, or if you're wanting to do a project about tackling crime within your area, then you can have a look at the data and statistics and find things that support why there is a need in your area. We did also have something called a hidden needs report, which was done with the University of Northampton a few years ago, and that's still on our website as well, and that sort of breaks down the priority needs in different areas of the county, because we understand that obviously if you're in Corby you're going to have different priorities and needs. For instance, if you're in Towcester or if you're in Daventry or Northampton, each area has got its own different priorities and needs. So we're going to start talking through the programs that we've got available. So the first one is one of our rolling programs. So that's Made by Sport Clubs in Crisis. It's a relatively new fund. It opened up in April. So this is a fund that is looking to support sports clubs and organisations that use sport as a development tool for working with young people. So as you can see, it's a grant of up to £2,021, which is, I always find, is quite a funny specific figure, but that's set by Made by Sport, so we will do whatever they like by having a very specific figure. And it's about improving young people's lives. So they class young people as aged from 5 up to 25, and it's about developing life skills, building stronger communities, improving mental health, developing employability skills, reducing crime and antisocial behaviour. So if you're a sports club or an organisation that uses sport to work with young people, then that is an excellent fund to go for. Then we've got another rolling programme, which is our Family Food Aid Fund. So this is about tackling food poverty. So it's specifically based on families that have children and young people within them, and it's a grant of up to £2,000. So this is sort of the fund that we would expect to see food banks applying to, or sort of community larders, or any types of organisations that are working to support families who also are noticing that there is a food poverty need connected to the families that they're working with. Again, it's a rolling programme, so there's no set deadline, and we realise that there's a lot of food poverty out there at the moment, particularly regarding COVID-19, because it hasn't gone away. So again, a great fund to apply to if you are in need of accessing small grants quickly. Now, this is a brand new fund that's just opened yesterday, which is very exciting for us. So this is the Constance Travis Endowment Fund Global Goals. So at Northamptonshire Community Foundation, we're really excited and committed to the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. It sounds very wordy and full on, but basically it's about thinking global but acting local. And the UN SDGs, to abbreviate them, is sort of quite broad areas that they want to tackle. So for instance, ending poverty, zero hunger, improving health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, reducing inequalities, environmental stuff, things like that. So it's stuff that's, has a global impact, but can also be focused on in tackling locally as well. So Constance Travis, their charitable trust, has got behind us to have this fund, which is a rolling programme again. It's up to £3,000, and at the moment we're going to be focusing on 5 of those. I think in total there's 18 UN SDGs, something like that. I'll probably get someone will tap me on the shoulder and tell me how many there are really, but there's quite a few UN SDGs, but at the moment we're focusing on 5 that we've had community conversations about as part of NCF. So focusing on, as I said, poverty, hunger, health and well-being, quality education and gender equality. So if you are doing any projects at the moment or want to do projects that have any of those focuses or needs, and again you're after a small grant quickly, then the Constance Travis Endowment Fund Global Goals will be a good one to go for. So now we're going on to sort of our more regular grant programs that we have running throughout the year. So the first one we're going to talk about, the first one we're going to talk about is the Queen's Institute Relief Fund, and this is a fund that's specific for Northampton. So this is also about focusing on improving health and well-being. This grant is up to £5,000 and it's going to be opening in July, and then the deadline for it is going to be the 6th of August, and it will go to a panel, a grants panel, at the end of September. So this is about improving people's health and well-being. It could be, for instance, activities that people can either go to in terms of support and advice. It could be counselling. It could be physical activities to get people moving. It could be using arts and creativity to improve people's health and well-being as well. So it's a slightly larger grant of up to £5,000. So for instance, if there was a project that you wanted to do, but it was a bit too much, for instance, for the Constance Travis grant, you could go for the Queen's Institute instead. Now, just to note with this fund, we are looking to fully allocate for this September round coming. So some of the other grants I'm going to talk about will be running throughout the rest of sort of 2021-2022 financial year, but this particular fund, we're looking to fully allocate it. So if you are thinking about applying for this Queen's Institute fund, I really highly recommend getting your application in by the 6th of August. So we've spoken about a fund that's specifically for Northampton. Now this is a grant that is aimed at Corby, Kettering and East Northamptonshire. It's a grant for up to £3,000. It's the Margaret Giffin Community Fund, and it's about tackling poverty and disadvantage in those areas. So what is now sort of Northamptonshire. So some examples of the types of projects it could be doing is obviously tackling child poverty, fuel poverty, food poverty. It could be about making sure that people have access to sort of low cost or free activities. It could be about giving advice and advocacy and support for vulnerable people. So lots of different projects that could fit within that tackling disadvantage caveat. So the deadlines for this, so we've got one on the 6th of August, one on the 8th of October and another on the 10th of December. And as I said, the main thing to just focus on with the Margaret Giffin Fund is that it is for organisations that are working within the Northamptonshire. Another one of our regular grant programmes is the Compton Fund for Arts, Culture and Heritage. So this is a grant which is again up to £5,000 that you can apply for. And the clue is in the title. It's about arts, culture and heritage. So if you are doing any projects that are connected to any of that, so it could be putting on a play or a musical, it could be, we funded, for instance, archaeological digs, if I could say the word. We've also sort of funded work to do with sort of workshopping new plays and connecting that to the community. Lots of different activities in terms of ways of providing heritage information. It's a great one to go for if you, for instance, wanted to maybe put on an event before you applied to a national funder like the Arts Council. It could be a good fund to go for locally before sort of going forward to the next national organisation step. Here we've got a great fund. It's a small fund, so it's up to £1,000, and this is the Northamptonshire Federation of Disability Sport Fund. So this is about getting people who have some form of disability, so obviously it could be a physical impairment, a sensory impairment or a mental health problem, into physical activity in sport. And it's about trying to engage people in sport and keeping them physically active. The fund, as I said, is up to £1,000, and this one isn't actually an online application. There's the form that is available for our website, and then you email that into us. And this fund is then looked at by the fund holder. We do have that occasionally within the Community Foundation, where we have more of a sort of close relationship with the funder, and they like to review the applications as well as ones that are reviewed either within our grants team or at grants panels. And then we do have a few geographically specific funds. So we have one over in Corby, which is the KHL Big Local Community Chess Fund. We have a couple of, as you can see, a few wind farm funds, and those are different ones that cover Burton, Latimer and Cranford. We've also got the Yelvertoft Community Fund, which covers Clay, Cotton, Crick, Lilburn and Yelvertoft, Rushton and Pipwell, and Winnick, Cold Ashby, West Haddon and Guilsborough. So those are specific funds where the energy company has put aside money for communities who are living in close proximity to the wind farms. So if you are from any of those areas and you would like to apply for funding, those are some great funds to go for, because they are directly able to benefit the communities that are connected to those wind farms. So that's our contact details. So obviously there's my email address for as Programmes Officer, and then also on the grants team is Anthony, who's our grants coordinator, and we've got the website address as well. I feel like I've rattled through quite quickly all of those grants programs, but the positive side is that we've got plenty of time for any questions that people might have, if they want to ask about any specific funds or any specific questions about eligibility criteria. And I know there's been a few questions in the chat, so let's have a quick look. Everyone talking about sound, which is great. So have a question from Kathy, which is, do you accept applications from churches? So churches, so that's a good question. So we do have, so for instance, sort of faith groups are able to apply for funding from the Community Foundation. A bit like with, for instance, let's say political organisations, though we don't fund those, but it would be a case of the funding, as long as it has a community benefit that is inclusive of everybody within the community, and the work wasn't trying to push a particular faith or religion, then yes, we could fund that project. We fund, for instance, Emmanuel group of churches, which are based over in the Eastern District, so sort of Western Fable and Blackthorn area. They do a lot of work within the community, but it's not a prerequisite to access their services that you have to be a believer in that particular faith.
I think you've got a question. Are we able to apply for 2 funds, i.e. Family Food Aid and the Constant Travis?
Yep. So what we can basically do is you're able to have 2 live grants at any one time with NCF. So but they have to be from different pots of money, and they would have to ideally be with different projects, because what us as NCF and other funders are wary of is things like duplication. So we wouldn't want to double fund a project. So if you as an organisation had a project that was focusing on family food aid, then of course you could apply to that fund. And then if you had another project that was perhaps, let's say, focusing on well-being, then you could apply to, let's say, the Constance Travis Fund or the Queen's Institute Fund if you were in Northampton. And that would be fine. You just have to make sure that they are, as I said, separate, that it's not duplication, and that the money would be coming from 2 different funding pots.
Okay, thank you. There is a question. Do you accept applications from parish council sponsored projects?
So we did, so with some of our funds, so for instance, when we had the coronavirus fund, we did accept applications from parish councils, and we've recently had confirmation from some of the wind farm funds that they are happy to accept applications from parish councils that have a wider benefit to the community and are not statutory. But a lot of our other funds, so for instance the Queen's Institute Fund for Northampton, or let's say the Constance Travis Global Goals Fund, they wouldn't be able to come from the parish council. They would have, if a group was applying, so a separate VCSE organisation was applying, but it had, let's say, match funding from the parish council, that would be fine, but it couldn't come from the parish council itself. And I've got a couple of the direct messages that have come through. So, so can you apply if you work in the NHS? So the NHS, a bit like councils, some of it would probably come under a statutory sort of heading, which means that it's things that should be paid for by the government, basically. This is, so as a community foundation, it's us, what we do is sort of work that benefits the community, and it's meant to be sort of as a added benefit. Obviously we realise at times that sometimes we do end up funding vital services, but an organisation such as the NHS has access to other funding that, for instance, more of a grassroots community organisation wouldn't have access to, and that's our sort of main purpose as a funder. So another question is, do you allocate funding to new groups or only established groups? We do, we are able to fund new organisations, but you still have to have the eligibility criteria, so you still have to have a constitution and governing documents and a bank account in the group's name and have policies. And that's, as I said, a lot of that's to do with us doing our due diligence as a funder, because a lot of the money that we're working with is public money, so we have to ensure that that's going to, you know, organisations that have the ability and capacity to be able to deliver the projects that they say that they're going to deliver. But then also it's that grant fraud element where sadly there are some nefarious characters out there who would quite like £5,000 to go on a beach similar to where Jake seems to be at the moment. So we have to ensure that the money is going to the right people, and by the right people I mean people who have gone through the different processes and have set up structures within their organisation to make sure that the projects that you want to do are actually going to happen. If you are after information about how to establish as a community group, Alison is a fantastic person to speak to about that, because of the development work that she does with Voluntary Impact Northamptonshire, and she's one of the experts that we have in the county about helping people set up community organisations. And then once you're ready to go and you're grant ready, then of course you can go ahead and apply. Do we fund schools?
Ooh, yeah.
Justine? So again, no, not strictly. We are able to fund friends of groups, or PTAs. So that means it's one of the ways of, you could possibly say, getting around the whole funding of statutory organisations. So for instance, we have funded in the past Friends of Beckett's Park in Northampton, which is a community group that sort of helps maintain the park. But for instance, with schools, it would have to have a wider community benefit. So if, for instance, you were wanting to purchase iPads for your school, which is a fantastic thing to want to do, but it's only students who go to that school during school time that will benefit from you having iPads. And so that would then be a question of, well, why can't that come out of the school budget if that's something that you want? And obviously, having worked in a school previously, I know that it's not as simple as that, but that's the sort of questions that we would be asking. And so it would have to have a wider community benefit beyond just the sort of 8 till 4 o'clock realm of a school. We've got a question about archaeological digs in Cooknoe. Lovely. And I want to carry out some research. And yes, that would be a great one to apply to the Compton Fund too. If you're wanting to do, we have funded heritage societies before. One of the great ones was over in Road, who did a whole heritage. They created this fantastic model of their railway back in the 1800s. It was fantastic. We went to go see it on a project visit. So yeah, heritage societies, please do apply to the Compton Fund. I've seen a question about help with constitutions. As I've said, fantastic local infrastructure organisations out there. There's one in Daventry Volunteer Centre, South Northants Volunteer Bureau, Nen Valley, Vin, and we've also, on our website, we do also have a section in the grants part called Help for Groups, and we do have some template constitutions and template documents. But as with any template document, you need to adapt it to make sure it fits the purpose of your organisation. So it's all very well going on Google and getting a template policy, but just make sure that your committee are having a meeting about it and making sure that it fits the purpose of your organisation, so that you know, as I said, if you're working with paid staff or if you're just working with volunteers, there's going to be lots of different areas that you might need to tweak to fit your type of organisation. But obviously, first port of call is obviously contact your local infrastructure organisation. So would we consider an application from Health and Wellbeing Service based over in Banbury? Sadly, we have to be quite sort of specific about geography, because we are a place-based funder, and obviously it is difficult when you get to sort of villages and towns that are on the sort of boundary lines, as it were, the county lines. but we would have to be we do have to be quite specific, and especially about sort of looking at percentages of where your sort of clients or service users came from. Luckily, there is a community foundation in Oxfordshire, so you can always approach them. We are surrounded by quite a few other community foundations, so if you are just over on the other side of the county, whether that's Bedfordshire or whether that's Cambridgeshire or Oxfordshire or Leicester, there are other community foundations out there if you just happen to be in a different postcode. Oh, Alison, people want your contact details. You'll have to put yours in the chat now. So do we offer grants to preschools? If you're a charity, yes, we do. If you are a registered charity, you can apply. Again, it would just be sort of making sure that any activity that you wanted to provide or any project that you were looking to do, if you could specify the need for it, and if you can demonstrate what the need is, and for instance, why that particular group might be disadvantaged and how you would use that money, then that would be able to obviously go ahead. And we've got a question about funding a BAME network. So we've helped Northamptonshire Black Communities Together fund. They actually applied and got some funding from our sort of network body, which is UKCF, which is the network of 46 community foundations across the UK. So I'm not sure if that's the network that you're on about, which is the new Black Communities Local Infrastructure Organisation that's recently set up. But in terms of other sort of networks or partnerships, networks and partnerships can apply. What you would have to do is have a lead organisation who would be applying, and that lead organisation would have to be obviously eligible to apply, and the grant would be in that organisation's name, and then they would also be responsible for the sort of end of grant report at stage. So we're talking about the monitoring and evaluations. So obviously once you get a grant, that's fantastic, you do the project, but then there's also the end section where you need to sort of talk about how the project went, and provide evidence of spend, and talk about the impact and the benefit that the project has brought. So the lead organisation would also be responsible for that. So that's sort of talking about partnerships and networks there. Do we support illegal immigrants who've got no rights to work or housing? So yes, that covers the no recourse to public funds. So if there was an organisation that was working with that particular sort of community of people, then we can fund that work. With our grants, we're not able to fund individuals. We are here to fund community organisations. We do have one very small bursary, which is about getting people into work and training. And we're hoping to have a small bursary that's a small bursary that will be available to disadvantaged students going to the University of Northampton, which is yet to be finalised. But on the whole, our funding is about supporting organisations. So they can be small organisations, small grassroots organisations, or they can be quite, what can seem quite large-scale charities or CICs, but it's about supporting groups rather than individuals. Well, I think that might be all the questions.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, another one's popped up.
Yeah, Royal British Legion one there.
Oh, yes. Oh, I haven't seen the British Legion one. Is that one specifically sent to you?
I'm not sure. It says the Royal British Legion does not allow their local branches to receive money specifically earmarked for a project, remembrance or military related event that the community would benefit from. Is there a legal way around this?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm going to answer this question, but I don't know if it's the actual. I don't know if it's actually answering the question, but I'll try. So, for instance, we as a funder, because we are a place-based funder, can't fund national charities. So, for instance, if you are, I'm trying to think of an example. Okay, yes, there's a good example. Age UK. So, for instance, when we think of Age UK, we think of it as a national charity that's across the UK, and from one perspective it is, but another perspective, which we ask for, is that the individual branches are constituted locally. So, for instance, we have an Age UK Northamptonshire, and that has its own constitution, and it has its own bank account, and it has its own board, its own committee. So we're able to fund that because it's locally constituted. So it's part of a larger network across the UK, but it has its own branch. So if, with that British Legion question, if it has its own constitution, it has its own bank account, it has its own committee that has a certain level of control over what that branch does, then that should be able to apply, as far as my knowledge tells me. So I hope that sort of answers the question.
I think that question was from Jake, and in a way I think probably Jake can follow up on that further with you, because I don't think, of my knowledge of the Royal British Legion, is that would not be just the way they're set up, different
right.
in UK. They would not be possible for them to do that. I think perhaps that Jake is wondering whether, if they worked with another organisation that was actually leading on the community event, it could almost be like a partnership type thing, with money coming through. I mean, Jake, if you want to unmute yourself, and because I'm sort of
Yeah, no, thank you, Alison. No, you're quite right, and thanks, Alex, as well, for explaining. The problem is, it is effectively our Royal British Legion constitution. The handbook says that we are not allowed to receive money from outside organisations for an event that we're going to be funding, but we seek extra funding for. In other words, the Royal British Legion Rushden branch of this account cannot receive money as a conduit, if you like, to pay for an event, which we're seeking funding for. But you did mention, and so it looks like that can't be happened. But you did mention Friends of, for example. So we do have a Friends of the Legion account, but I'm not sure if there probably is, but I'm not sure if there's a constitution and a committee and all that sort of stuff. So I'll look into that further. It's just that my concern was that it's purely simply because our hands are tied, and so too would a potential donor's hand be tied if they wanted to send money direct to the branch to help offset the cost of a remembrance military related event. Even though we wouldn't be using a penny of it, we're not even allowed to receive it to then pass it straight on.
It sounds like it is a quite complicated setup that they've got there. But as Alison said, if you linked up with another organisation, so for instance, if you partnered with, for instance, wherever you were going to host the event, if you were hosting it with a community sort of venue, so like a community hall that might be set up, then that could be a possible way of getting funding for an event that you'd be hosting, but as you said, the money wouldn't be going through you.
Yeah.
Or if you have a friends of sort of subgroup that could manage that on the sort of the main group's behalf, then that's possibly another way of working that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
No worries. And then I've got another question coming about constitutions, about the groups, organisations that provide help with constitutions. So I'll just go over those again. So we've got Voluntary Impact Northamptonshire, which Alison works with. Then we've got South Northants Volunteer Bureau, if you're in sort of the south of the county, so Toaster and so on and so forth. We've got Daventry Volunteer Centre in Daventry. I don't know why I keep saying where they are in case people don't know. The name's in the title. But then Nen Valley Community Action. And then we've also got Kettering. Yep. So we've got Kettering Volunteer. Is it Volunteer Network or Volunteer Bureau? Network, I think.
Volunteer Network. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then we've also got Corby as well, has a voluntary community sector organisation as well. So you can obviously contact those organisations, and they can help you with the development side of setting up an organisation. And also, again, the sort of clue is in the name. They can also help you source volunteers as well. So it's a double win if you contact your local infrastructure organisation, and they offer lots of other services as well. So definitely make a note, everyone, and contact them. So I can see there's another question about if there's any funding that might contribute towards communications costs, such as improving websites or creating a newsletter. So in terms of funding from us, it would have to be, again, sort of be able to demonstrate the community benefit of that. Obviously, we realise that obviously does have a benefit, but it would just have to be able to demonstrate that within the application, and also you just thinking about where you are geographically within the county to think about what could be the most relevant fund to apply for.
If you're talking about finding funds, there used to be something called Funding Central, but that closed. But there was a seamless, in theory, handover of the data and things to something called My Funding Central. Not a lot of different name, but if you Google My Funding Central, it's a national database of funding opportunities that are out there, and dependent on your size, you have to subscribe to it, but dependent on your size, it is free for smaller organisations. I think it's under £30,000 it's free. If you're between 30 to 50, it's £50, and then it goes up. But if you're a small organisation, having a look at My Funding Central to find out about all the pots of money that are out there is a great resource. Sorry, Alex.
No, it's a great plug. Yeah, there are luckily some really great resources out there to search for funding, and again, some local infrastructures are able to help you with that process as well. And if, for instance, you sent me an email and we weren't able to find a fund that's under the Community Foundation for you to apply to, then I would also do my best to try and point you in the direction of another possible funder. But there's, as Alison said, there's some fantastic resources out there online. So I've got another question that's come in about the Compton Fund for a community orchestra to purchase equipment. So so if you are an orchestra that needs to purchase equipment to be able to deliver performances, then that is something that would be considered. Again, it would just be sort of talking about how that would then be able to reach the wider community. So for instance, do you provide concerts, for instance, for let's say at a reduced rate if you're performing to older members of the community, or something similar, or would it be benefiting, for instance, young players who might be sort of financially struggling? So again, it's I heard this in the Arts Council webinar that I went along to earlier on. It's talking about what the need is, and or what you want to deliver as a project and why it's needed. And I think having that in mind when you are writing an application, having those two questions at the forefront of what is it that I want to deliver and why is it needed, and being able to answer that will having that covered within your application is really going to help any funder understand the sort of what you're trying to do and the benefit that you're trying to bring to the community. Right, well, I think I don't know if there's any other questions. I can't see anybody's hands up or any other questions that popped in, so I think we might have done it, Alison.